Hi, welcome to the North Phoenix Suburban Stead. My name is Rich. In this video, it's going to be instructional on how to remove and reinstall a carburetor on a dirt bike.
This video is part 2, reinstallation of the carburetor. If you haven't done so already, check out part 1, the removal. Note how the removal process was done with the reinstallation in mind. Installation is the reverse order of removal. This is a list of the items from the bottom up. For the reinstallation process, we'll start with electronics, then the hot start, throttle, the rear shock, put the subframe back on, top stuff, which is the seat, the battery, and the gas tank. So let's get rolling. Okay, so we did the repairs that we wanted to on the carburetor. That's another video. Now we're going to put this back in, and yes, it goes in the order or the backwards order of the way we removed it, but I'm still going to walk you through. It'll be a little bit quicker than removal. So first thing, we've got all of these tubes, and now we've got the right clips here now too. So let's just kind of place these. They're going to go down behind the shock absorber, and this is the hot start cable. We're going to wire that, or feed that back through rather, not wire it. We'll just let that hang as we attach some of the other components first. So you'll see I'm slipping it in there as I'm feeding this through. And the objective here, and again, be careful, things they don't tell you. Right now I've got the rubber boot that attaches the carburetor to the engine is open. It's totally open. Anything drops in there, it's going to be on top of the valves. So you want to be really careful about putting it back in. Make sure you seat it correctly, and try your best not to let any dust or dirt get in there. So let me get, I'll put the camera on that. Now we've got a closer look at the boot, and you'll see that there's these two rubber pieces here. This is completely loose, and we want to feed that in there, and there's a tab on the carburetor that's going to go right between those two. So let me fix this light. Just moving some things out of the way as I go to reseat this. Now, if you saw when we took it out, it took a little bit to pull that out. And so be patient here. And should slip in pretty easily. There we go. And we're in, and you can feel it. It gets, you can feel it seat, and it can't go in any further. All right, so now I want to be able to get access to that screw so I can tighten the clamp. So something they don't tell you here, it would be really pretty quick to just put the screwdriver in to go ahead and tighten that clamp right there. But I've got the hot start cable is right there. So I actually want to kind of angle this down a little bit and come in from the side here. I see, I got a I think I have one of those drain tubes. Seems to be not seated correctly. So bear with me. Okay, here we go. Now I've got it where I want it. Remember, I made this thing pretty loose, so I'm gonna crank on it, make sure I got a really good snug fit. I can feel that the carb is still in there strong. And she's turning just fine.
All right. I don't know if there's a torque spec on that, and I don't even really care. I think it's pretty tight. Carburetor is in there really solid. All right, let's put some other pieces back together. So we'll hook back up the power. Notice that these are the throttle cables, and we haven't hooked them back up yet. I actually want this to go under them. And there's enough play in the wire that it can easily go below them, and it won't obstruct them. Pretty simple stuff. I don't know if you can see, I think my hand's in the way. But pretty simple, it just clips right in. Just clips right in. Just clips right in. You'll hear it click. Yeah, that's a better view. Perfect. All right, so we got the electronics. Now I've got a couple other pieces here. This piece stays out here. Stays above. It's just an open air, and it clips onto the tube for the air relief that goes to the top of the valves. So that's right here. Now that we've clipped in the power, we want to feed, there's a tube, an air relief tube that stays above the carb, and it goes through the middle of this piece right here, and it attaches, this air relief attaches right to the top of the valve cover. So let's get that seated. There's a clamp. I had to move the camera out of the way so I could get my hand in here and get it seated correctly. So now I've got it around, and let me just get it all the way down, and then we'll put the clamp on it. You know what, I'm calling that good enough. Here we go. Now here's another air relief, and that just clips right on there. I don't know if that's an air relief. I don't know what it is. Clips on. The next piece on the reinstall is reattaching the throttle cables. Now, if you remember, we marked the throttle cables. We knew which one was on top. So we're going to feed this through to get it placed down near here, and we'll do the bottom one first. Okay, now we're going to reattach the throttle cables to the carburetor, and you'll see there's a clip right here where my fingers, that needs to be up when it gets seated into the bracket or the manifold or whatever it's called. But before I do that, I want to get the cable connected. So remember, this is the bottom one, and you'll see I just put it in there. Now I'll just gently pull this and keep it around the pulley. I've got my fingers up here to hold that clip and to make sure that that clip goes on the outside of that manifold or whatever you call it, and it seats right in there. And you want to make sure that that clip that has the lip is facing the middle of the bike. Okay, so I've got that seated in there. Maybe that's the pull to open it, not the return. Either way, it was the bottom one. So now I've got the top one. I put it somewhere. There it is. So hopefully you can see that. Let me check really quick. So here's the top one, and I know it's a top because I marked it with a T. So that needs to go along the top of the pulley and be seated with that same type of clip staying on the outside. So I'm not going to seat it just yet because I want to be able to get the cable in, get that pin in. Oh, it's reversed. So now that I've got it there, let's see if I can pull it. Maybe I should have done the top one first, because that's the return.
I don't know. I pulled it. Oh, it's because I turned it. So let me see if I can turn the throttle and if I can get it in there any easier. You know what? It was just stuck on the bracket. So let's get that cable off the bracket. So I have more play with the cable to get it into the slot. T on the outside. There she is. Now she's in. And on the pulley. Now I got to move up that clip I've been telling you about. I know you can't see it right now, but it's a pain. And maybe there's a better way to do this. I don't know. But I never seen any videos of anybody talking through the detail on this. So I really have no idea if it's right. I don't know any tips or tricks. I'm just telling you from what I got frustrated with last time I did this. I got the clip in my finger. I'm now going to seat the cable in its holder or in the bracket, the manifold, I don't know what you call it, and tighten it up. And I'm going to do this to a hand tight. Actually, I don't want to do that yet. Why? Because I got to put on the plastic freaking shield or whatever that thing is. All right, take a pause here. Okay, more difficult stuff. So this is the plastic cover that goes over the throttle connection. There's these tabs here. It goes on the outside of the bracket, or I don't know what you call it. And there's clips on the throttle. There's all types of stuff that you got to be conscious of. There's also two screws here. If you saw me take it out, the first one we're going to hand tighten it, and then it's really difficult to get a Allen wrench in there, but when you go for it, of course. And then there's one that goes back here that's pretty accessible. So let's first get this seated with the throttle cable connections and the clips to the manifold. I'm going to switch your angle. All right, this is a little bit hard to see, but it's going to take some finessing. I'm actually going to loosen up just a little bit on the throttle cable, and I'm taking the plastic piece and coming in from the back to be able to seat it correctly. As I mentioned, right, it goes on the outside of the bracket, and the clips go on the outside as well. So this is going to take a little bit. I'm going to stop talking and just finesse it. I'll probably fast forward this for you. I don't know if I'm exactly doing this correctly, but I really don't care. As long as I have it seated correctly, which I do. Now I'm just tightening back up the throttle cables. This is the bolt. Really difficult to get in there. I'm going to go with fingers on both sides to get it started. Hopefully I can spin it pretty far and get it connected, and then put an Allen wrench to it. And this, of course, I'm assuming it's all lined up correctly. Yeah, you probably can't see it too well, even with the better light I put on it, because of these tubes that are in the way. But I've got it in there. I'm cranking it down with my fingers. There we go. Nice. Oh man, it's so nice to get that done. All right, let me show you the other one. All right, so now we've got this bolt, and that's going to go right up in here. You know, I should take my own advice. You probably, if you've listened from the beginning, one of the things I preached about was have better lighting. Yeah, dumbass. I mean, I've got some good lighting here, but not like this flashlight in a good position. So it's difficult to see on the camera. Again, I don't have zoom on the camera either. That's another video. We're going to be talking about upgrading camera equipment for the YouTube videos. Okay, now we're in. All right, so let's review really quick. So we seated the carburetor back into the boot. We tightened down this clamp. We then connected the electrical
which is right here, connected that clip, and then we just put the throttle cables together. So I'm gonna move this really quick and take this another air relief and just take it off the top of the throttle cables. So there's the throttle cable connections, and we put the plastic protector, or whatever you call it, this thing back on the throttle pieces. The next thing we're going to do now is hook back up the hot start. All right, I lied. We're not going to the hot start just yet. First thing I want to do is verify that I've got the throttle cables connected correctly. So what you're looking at here is the intake of the carburetor. And we're looking for that in the background, that when I spin it, it comes up full throttle, lets all that air in, and it drops back down when I release it. It's got nice action, it's simple. That is verified to me that I have tightened the throttle cables correctly at the right location. That feels good to me. Okay, now on to the freaking hot start cable. If you watched earlier in the video, when it comes to the hot start, I mentioned that you have a choice. And that choice is that you can disconnect it from the carburetor, or you can disconnect it from the hot start lever. I chose the hot start lever, and the reason I did that is because I watched enough videos where people cautioned you about that, because it's a plastic connection and you can easily strip it or break it, and I just don't feel like dealing with that. So I'm actually going to remove this number plate, or the light. I'm not going to remove it. Let me see if I can get this fed up through correctly where I want it to go. Inside there's just a metal piece here that keeps things together up through the steering column, and you'll see I just pulled it straight through. So now we've got to take the hot start cable and we want to feed it through the boot. Then we're going to connect it to the cable, and then we will seat, I don't know what you call that thing, the plunge or something, I don't know, whatever it's called. I'm sure there's a word for it. I'm sure mechanics know it. But again, not a mechanic, just a guy who desires to do it on his own. Alright, so I'm through the boot. Now I want to pull that cable. To be able to seat that cable in the lever. Comes up from the bottom. There we go. I'm in there. Now I want to be able to pull it and seat it in its housing there. And that's it. Feels good. Pull the boot back over. Alright, hot start, reconnected. So we're ready to reattach the shock absorber to the frame. A couple things to note and things they don't tell you. This is an air relief valve that connects up to the bladder for the air intake. You want to make sure that that is on this side. It just gets a little bit cumbersome to try to feed it back through. It can be done, but it gets cumbersome. What you'll also notice is that there's going to be a little bit of a twist to the shock absorber. So I have a helper here who's going to help me to get it aligned by lifting up the back tire, and so the swing arm will come up, and then it's just going to be some brute force and maybe some hammering, don't know, to get this realigned back in here so I can get the bolt in correctly. Oh yeah, it goes one way in this particular bike. So like that. All right, here we go. So a little bit lower, now a little bit higher. Right about there, hold on. Kind of go up and down a little bit. Got more down, there we go. So I got it through. So if you have a helper, that would be nice. What I have done in the past too, when I've done this before, is I actually put a jack under the back tire, and a auto jack, and was able to just go ahead and use that a little bit to lift it up and get it into a better position to be seated. So that's it. Let me crank it down. I'm sure there's a torque spec on this. I don't know what it is. I'm just gonna go click, and that's pretty tight. So I think we're good there. All right, now this is gonna come the hard part, and that is we're gonna put the subframe back on. Now the most important piece here is to make sure that we've got the air bladder connected to the carburetor intake correctly. That's going to be the key piece. Now remember, the things they don't tell you, we took off the muffler, which is, you'll see right here, we took that off so we don't have to deal with trying to get that correct while we're getting that correct. We want to focus on this, make sure we have it seated correctly. I'm going to show you some other things too that are a little bit of a challenge, but let's go ahead and get this thing into position, then I'll move the camera to show you how the boot gets seated. Okay, now I did see some videos where they talked about some tricks about getting some of the pieces, or I think even putting a bolt or two in on the subframe before you seat everything. I'm not going to do that here. I don't believe I am. Meaning, I'm just going to look to make sure we've got this close. I really want to focus on that seating of the boot first. Then I'll worry about the screws. Or the bolts, rather. All right, this is going to be really hard to see, but it's being seated up in here, and I just don't have a good camera angle on this. Actually, let me even try to move it, see if we can get you something better. It's up in here. So I've got these two drainage tubes that I just put the clip on, and I replaced this. I replaced the throttle, the fuel inlet. So I'm going to feed these cables a little bit, or not the cables, but the drainage tubes a little bit out of, see if I can get it a little bit out of the way so it's not inhibiting us, and you can see hopefully inside here. Now on the boot there is this rubber tab. I'm kind of flicking it with my finger right now. It's a little bit hard to see. That tab is designed for you to be able to pull the air boot over the intake of that, but it's really not that simple. And it's not only is it not that simple, mine actually has a little crack in it. So it's not a crack that it's impacting the actual boot itself, but it is nonetheless, it's a crack, so I'm a little bit precarious with it because I don't want it to I don't want it to rip any further. So I think, you know what I'm going to do here is I am going to put in one bolt on the subframe. I'm going to do that on the other side so I can hold the subframe up better. Otherwise it just falls back down. So just one bolt on the right side here. And we'll just get that seated a little bit. Okay. So we may do another one too. We'll see how this goes. So hopefully you can see I am on it. I'm on the carburetor piece. I'm going to see if I can get the tab to do this correctly. You know what? I think I'm going to put in the other bolts here in the bottom of the subframe. Now I'm doing the lower left side on the subframe. So that'll give me an up and down motion, but not a left to right as I continue to try to see this. So I'm going to take a pause here. Okay, reposition the camera. Made a few just slight adjustments here to get into position. So I've got the flashlight on here, and it's hard to see, but that is the clamp on the end of the boot that's going around the carburetor. You'll see right here that I've got these two about 1.5 inches, maybe 2 inches away. I'll be lifting it up and down as I continue to finesse to get that boot seated correctly. So
I imagine, actually I'll talk about this as I go through it. I imagine that this is one of the bigger challenges, and why when you watch all those other videos and the things that they don't tell you is because this is not an easy job. Getting this thing in and getting it seated correctly is not that simple. I imagine if you've got a lot of experience and you've done it before, it'd be great. I don't. I know what needs to happen, but how I'm going to get there is another story. You know what? I'm going to ask for a helper again. Hang on. So those who are still watching right now, this is where struggle comes in. Looks really good on this side. Now let me just verify the other side, and we'll put a bolt in. Everything looks lined up pretty good. Oh yeah, she's in there nicely. So we're now going to put the bolts back in to the subframe. All right, we're reattaching the subframe now. So I've got the bolt in on that side. I'm going to get the bolt in here, and I'm going to ask you just a little bit up to the right, just like that. Not too much, right there. A little bit more. Okay. We got that seated correctly. Then we'll take the bolt, the third one, and it goes in at the top. Get that seated. Look at us, as if we know what we're doing. All right, you're all good. I'm going to tighten them down now. Click. Okay, if you remember when we were putting the top of the shock absorber back on, there was this air tube that I said you wanted to feed under where the shock absorber connects before you do it. It's just that it's just difficult and cumbersome to get it back through if it was on the other side. But this is an air relief valve or air relief connection. I don't know what you call it. And I've got it here just connecting it right to the air bladder. Back on the shot of the carburetor here, and this is the piece that I just replaced. So I'm going to pull these tubes now back down. I want to get them out of the way. These are the drainage tubes, and we'll seat those correctly here. Okay, all that looks good. We're ready to put the gas can back on. So let me get that. So as I do this, a friendly reminder that you've got this piece here that's connected to the gas tank, and you want to be really careful of all of this as you seat it back through. You want to make sure you don't bang it, you don't hit anything. Just nice and easy, slip it in there. There's really only one position this can go in. Pull the fuel line. Should have fed that through first. But the fuel line's going to be looking like it's pretty good. Alright, so it's seated well. Now let's reattach the, I don't know what you call it, the shut-off valve here. If you remember, I put this bolt in to keep it in place. This goes on the outside and clips in here. Okay, so let me move the camera. So this is the piece that I replaced. That's the fuel inlet valve. And I'm just gonna connect it all back up. I'll turn it on and test it for leaks as well. A little bit of a different style here, but nonetheless works perfect. A little bit of struggle bus again with these freaking clips. There we go. All right, I'm good with that. And that clip just holds it. So here we go. I'm going to turn the, oh, you can't see, it's up here. I'll turn this on and then check for leaks. It looks pretty good. Sweet. Let me turn it back off for now just so we can finish this up. Then we'll fire it up, of course. So we're going to hook up the battery down. It's something I thought I would share with you that I learned, not in these videos, but other ones. There's a nut in there, and a nut only fits in a certain way. Same thing on positive and negative side. You'll see some white around there. That's just a little bit of grease that I put on the bottom of it to hold it in that position. So when I go to put the screw in, it will capture it. I won't have to finesse with it. So here we go. Positive first. Okay, I can feel it grabbing it. Awesome. All right, gas tank back on, battery back in. Can do a little crank here. Yeah, baby. And let's go ahead and put the seat back on. Not the seat, the muffler goes next. So if you'll remember what we talked about in the beginning, one of the big things that they don't tell you is that it's a struggle to get everything back on, especially if you keep the muffler on. So what we said was, let's take the muffler off, and we learned that the hard way the first time we did this. It just slides right back into the tube, no problem, everything lines up. It's all good. Two bolts. And we're ready to go. Almost. Click. Click. Muffler on. Let's move on to the next one. So the next piece to put back on here is the reserve tank for the coolant on this bike. I kept everything attached. Remember, I put these plugs in there, and I'm trying to, as best I can, not have it drip at all.
Be aware it's likely going to drip, but you want to minimize this stuff, especially coolant. It's like, and brake fluid, those are the worst. Alright, let's get that one on. Wow, that was fucking stupid. Probably why it wasn't going on well is because it wasn't seated correctly up here. Oh shit. Typical stuff at the North Phoenix Suburban Stead. Who would know that this would be one of the more challenging pieces? Man, maybe I'm just getting tired because it's been kind of a long day doing this job. But spilled a little bit, not a huge amount. Cleaned it up. I'm still on the reserve right between the upper and the lower, so we're all good there. Let's put the seat on, and then we will fire it up, and hopefully she operates correctly and there's no more leaking. And you learned a few things about how to remove and how to reinstall a carburetor. So let's go. Make sure I didn't screw anything up. Okay. I'm gonna do a quick once over. Make sure I've got everything connected correctly. Actually, I'll do it with you. So we've got the carburetor is seated correctly with the boot there and the boot in the back. So that looks good. Everything is tight. We checked for leaking there. We've got our drain tubes correctly. And on the other side, somewhere behind that mess, we know we connected it electronically, so we're good there. Shock absorber is back in. We've got the line hooked up, and we know that we hooked up the hot start as well. So let's bring this outside and give it a quick shot. Let's see how long she takes to fire up. Our Lady of Blessed Acceleration, don't fail me now. Time circuit's on, flux capacitor fluxing, engine on.